Thank you all for joining us here at I-80 Sports, where today it's the beginning of the NHL playoffs. The Stanley Cup playoffs is here for the year 2025, and we're here to break down all of the matchups and give our predictions. Guys, thank you all for joining us here again at I-80 Sports. Thank you all for joining us here at I-80 Sports. Make sure that you subscribe down below, youtube.com/NHL on I-80 Sports, to keep up with all of our content here. We're going to be breaking down all the matchups in the Stanley Cup playoffs for the first round and beyond. Stick around. Comment down below with what you think of the upcoming playoffs, and hit the like button if you also like our content as well. And away we go. It's playoff time, as seen by my crudely shaped beard so far, so that's how we know it's the playoffs. I'm Brian. He's Tom. Tom, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. It's the playoffs again. It's unfortunate this year. My favorite team is not in it. They're in the midst of, I would say, a retool. I don't think they're going to rebuild the team. There's a lot of question marks with them. There's stuff we can address at a later date. There's a lot of work to be done in the offseason, but I fully expect them back in next year with maybe a little bit of a different lineup. That being said, it also comes down to something else that I just wanted to get into. We didn't talk about it much this year. It's a tribute to someone who has been the voice of Rangers hockey for the last 40 years. I'm 37, so he's been the voice on TV for my entire life, basically. And also somebody who, back in the Channel 5 days, if you got the second marquee game, him and Joe Micheletti, who's his partner now, where they announced him there. That gentleman is Sam Rosen. Sam just announced his retirement last year. Last night, unfortunately, he did his last game because the Rangers didn't make the playoffs. Wish like hell they could have come back after the run last year and won it for him this year. Obviously, that was not to be. There was a lot of cracks in the foundation there that Chris Jury had to fix and is still fixing. So unfortunately, they didn't make it this year. So last night was the last night we will ever hear Sam Rosen do a Ranger game on MSG Network. I'm sure that he will still be around in some capacity. Next year is the 100th anniversary of the franchise. So you would assume he'll probably be involved in some way or some form next year with ceremonies and the like. I'm sure they're not going to just dump him off. But, for many years, growing up as a little kid, it was him and John Davidson doing the games. And it was great that TNT let them do a game together last week, but also very sad knowing that I'll never hear them two do a game again. And then afterwards, when I was a senior in high school, JD had left to go to the management side for various teams like St. Louis, Columbus, and eventually the Rangers again. And Joe Micheletti joined them. And him and Joe Micheletti have been a solid announced team now for the last however many years. It's the last 19 years. They covered the Henrik Lundqvist era, those great runs to the final, and then the early Igor Shesterkin era now, where the teams have been fairly good over the last 3 years. So believe it or not, I was thinking about it. The fun fact about it is everybody's saying, oh, it's great to hear Sam and JD. Reminds me when they didn't suck. And I'm thinking about it and I'm going, you know what? The team actually had better records in my lifetime when Sam and Joe were the announced team than Sam and JD. But that's besides the point. Sam Rosen, a legend amongst broadcasting, tributes everywhere throughout the league. He'll always be involved with the Rangers. He'll always be associated with the Rangers. And congratulations on your retirement. Unfortunately, like I said, they couldn't make the playoffs this year. But like I said, much alike, congrats to Sam Rosen on a great career. And, it's sad to see him go. But the gentleman who will be taking his spot is no stranger to Rangers hockey either. That's Kenny Albert. Kenny Albert does the national games on TNT. He's been the Rangers radio guy since his dad Marv decided to stop doing Ranger games on the radio. He took the pedestal for him. Kenny Albert knows just as much about the Rangers as Sam does, and he's been just around almost as long. When Kenny is not around to do the games, Alex Foss will step in. Alex Foss is another solid play-by-play guy. He's been doing the games on the radio for ESPN when Kenny hasn't been around and when Don LaGreca has been unable to do them. Alex Foss also does national games on TNT as well. So it's not like Sam is leaving them with some inexperienced guy. He's leaving the booth in good hands. And I look forward to the new era with Kenny Albert and Alex Foss splitting the play-by-play duties. And Joe Micheletti will be back to be the color guy. So, hopefully, things turn out different next year. And like I said, hopefully when they do the 100th anniversary celebration next year, Sam is involved in some capacity, and I very well think he will be.
Unfortunate finish for Rangers fans this year. Certainly, me as a Devils fan, kind of love seeing it. But, I'm going to stay classy here and just say for Sam Rosen, congrats on your retirement. And Kenny Albert, although is more than capable, certainly does have big shoes to fill for Sam Rosen, who has been the voice for the New York Rangers for a long time now. And Kenny Albert is more than capable to take over as well. So congrats to Sam Rosen. Congrats to Kenny Albert on the promotion as well, especially since we're so familiar with his voice to begin with. But we're here not just to, shower compliments on Sam Rosen and MSG Network and all that fun stuff. We're here for the playoffs right now. So let's break down the playoff bracket right now. So going from east to west, we've got our first round matchups. So in the east, we've got Toronto facing Ottawa, the Toronto Maple Leafs facing the Ottawa Senators, the Tampa Bay Lightning facing the Florida Panthers, the Washington Capitals facing the Montreal Canadiens, and the Carolina Hurricane facing your New Jersey Devils. And on the West Coast, you have the Winnipeg Jets facing the St. Louis Blues, Dallas Stars facing the Colorado Avalanche, the Vegas Golden Knights facing the Minnesota Wild, and the Los Angeles Kings facing the Edmonton Oilers. So a lot to break down here. Some really fun and exciting matchups here for the first round. I think if you ask me, obviously I'm going to be paying close attention to that Carolina-New Jersey matchup, especially because their rivalry has really sparked over the last 2 years, and it's been, quite a up and down season for that matchup this year. The Tampa Bay Lightning Florida Panthers matchup, I think, is one that a lot of people are going to be watching on the Eastern side of things, along with Toronto, Ottawa. Dallas, Colorado is also the other matchup that a lot of people are going to be really tuning in to watch as well. But let's go matchup by matchup right now to talk about these matchups. We're going to start here with the Toronto Maple Leafs versus the Ottawa Senators. With these predictions, we're going to talk some contributing factors to these matchups, and we're also going to give our prediction of how these playoff series are going to finish. So, Tom, let's start here with you. What are some keys to the Toronto Maple Leafs, the Ottawa Senators, and who's coming out on top?
Well, I guess the key to Toronto is it's the same key it's been for how many years with them now? It's their top dogs have to show up. Austin Matthews, William Nylander, Mitch Marner, John Tavares. They have to show up. They need help from their top defenseman, Morgan Riley. They need their goaltending to be good. What they have going for them this year as opposed to other years is this. They're not playing a contender. They're not playing a team rich in experience. They're playing basically a team that's new to all of this in the Ottawa Senators. They're new to all of this. So they did. It's not the Boston Bruins. It's not the Tampa Bay Lightning. They actually, believe it or not, I know nobody ever thought you'd hear me say this. They have the experience edge. They do. They do. And they showed it the other night against Buffalo in order to close the division out and clinch the division to avoid playing either Florida or Tampa. In addition to their top guys showing up, Matthew Knies has had a great year. They have some grit out there now with Max Domi, Bobby McMahon as well. They have some grit and some depth scoring on those first three lines. But they're going to need all that to put together for the reborn Battle of Ontario. And speaking of when I was younger, this was a common occurrence in the early 2000s. Now, as far as Ottawa's concerned, you look at the lines up and down. Ottawa's first line is obviously leaps and bounds ahead of their other lines. Brady Tkachuk, Tim Stützle, Claude Giroux. Brady has shown he can show up in big moments. He showed the Four Nations. Tim Stützle, the jury is still out on. Claude Giroux, well, we know what he's made of. He's been in the playoffs before. He's gotten to the finals. He went deep with those Flyers teams more than a few times. If they want to go anywhere, they're going to need that line especially to do what they need to do, because their other three lines, I would say, are a little underwhelming in comparison to Toronto's other three lines. Back on D, you have Jake Sanderson up top, but it's the same thing. I give Toronto the advantage on D as well. Outside of Jake Sanderson, I feel like Jake Sanderson might be the best defenseman out of all 12 defensemen amongst these two teams. I give him the nod. But at the same time, depth-wise, I actually like Toronto a little better. And I saw Travis Hamonic on Ottawa. I can't believe he's still playing. I remember him from way back when. Now we have the goaltending. We have Linus Ullmark and Anton Forsberg versus what Toronto has in, versus what Toronto has in Joseph Woll. Woll has been good.
And Anthony Stolarz as well.
Stolarz, I think, is going to start. I'm sorry, I looked at the wrong one. Stolarz is actually going to start. But I will give Ottawa the edge in the goaltending, as their goaltending has carried them all year to this improbable playoff spot that they find themselves in. That being said, if I go by experience and I go by law of averages and I go by history, this is going 7. It is. But at the same time, that Game 7 heartbreak that Maple Leafs fans are so used to, I don't think is happening this time around. I'm going with the Leafs. I'm going in 7 here. The Leafs, for whatever reason, they always, and I mean, I know it's not the Leafs of Matt Sundin and Gary Roberts, and I know it's not the Sens of Daniel Alfredson and Marian Hossa. I know it's not those teams anymore. I know Eddie Belfour and Curtis Joseph aren't in net for the Leafs this time around like it was back then. But if we're going by history, we're going by experience, we're going by law of averages, I got to give this one to the Leafs. I do. Leafs move on.
Hey, if they don't have Ty Domi, they've got Max Domi. So
yeah, he was around back then. He's been great for them too.
Yeah. If you ask me, this is a great matchup. I think this is going to be a lot of fun. This is going to be a very physical matchup between Ottawa and Toronto as well. Brady Tkachuk has been chomping at the bit to finally play his first NHL playoff series, and I don't think he's going to miss his chance to really make some noise out there. He's a gamer, and I think he's a major X factor for the Ottawa Senators. That being said, he's going into this series a little bit banged up. So that, I think, is going to be something to monitor and see how Toronto tries to target that and exploit that a little bit. For Toronto, this is do or die for them in a lot of ways. This is a very pivotal moment for the Toronto Maple Leafs that have been always a team that has been successful, but hasn't quite made it over the hump. And their talent needs to rise to the occasion. Austin Matthews, Willie Nylander, John Tavares, Mitch Marner, Max Domi, Matthew Nyes, just to name a few guys that really need to show up in this series. And the reason why I say it's a pivotal, and possible turning point here for Toronto, what is this lineup going to look like possibly next year, especially because John Tavares is an unrestricted free agent. Mitch Marner is an unrestricted free agent. I'll be curious to see if both, one of, or neither of them return to Toronto next year. Now, if you ask me, I think that there's a great likelihood that one or both of them do return to Toronto. But who knows at this point? This is a big turning point. Matthew Nyes is ready for his big boy contract too. That's something that's going to be talked about after this season as well. It's not like Toronto is made of money, and there's going to be some important decisions that they're going to have to make in the offseason. And I think part of that decision is going to lie in how they do in the playoffs this year. How does Mitch Marner do in the playoffs this year? How does Tavares show up in the playoffs this year? So I think those are big storylines to kind of follow going into this series of, those players that I just mentioned, and John Tavares and Mitch Marner, are they going to rise to the occasion because of the pressure of what their next contract could be? Because this is going to be the last lingering moment that people are going to have in their heads when deciding what contract to offer them in the offseason. So I think that's going to be interesting to see. Comparing the offenses, Toronto certainly does have the edge on offense. I mentioned all the firepower that they had before. That being said, also, Ottawa's no slouch. Ottawa has plenty of contribution throughout their lineup between Brady Tkachuk, Tim Stützle, Claude Giroux, Drake Batherson, David Perron, Shane Pinto, recently acquired Dylan Cousins as well, playing on the second line. And then even in depth scoring, they've got some depth down below with Ridley Grieg, Fabian Zetterlund, Michael Amadio, Adam Gaudette, and Nick Cousins is going to be a person that's going to try to ruffle some feathers in this series as well if he gets to really kind of play and let loose. Defensively, I would say that Ottawa might have the edge here just purely because of Jake Sanderson. And I think I think Ottawa's going to try to play Jake Sanderson about 25 minutes per night, if you ask me. And then in that, I'm actually going to say that Ottawa kind of has the edge. I like Linus Ullmark more than I do Anthony Stolarz and Joseph Woll combined. Now, I'm going to agree with Tom. It's going to go 7 games, but I like to watch the world burn. And I'm going to say the Ottawa Senators are going to upset the Toronto Maple Leafs in 7 games. So we both have this going the distance, and it's going to be fun to watch. Another series that's going to be fun to watch is the Tampa Bay Lightning versus the Florida Panthers. Tom, what are some keys to this series, and who do you see coming out on top?
Well, I mean, it's a rivalry. It's become one. This is the 4th time they've met in the playoffs now. Mm-hmm. Tampa took the first 2. One close series, the other one pretty convincing fashion. Florida took it in pretty convincing fashion last year. What's happening here is that if you look at what Tampa has up top versus what Florida has up top, and right now on Daily Faceoff, Florida's lines are all completely wrong because there's a lot of guys, they held a lot of guys out in the last couple of games.
Yeah.
Namely Matthew Tkachuk, who's been out since 4 Nations, Aaron Ekblad back on D, Sasha Barkov, Sam Reiner, Anton Lundell are all out. You figure they're all going to slot in that top 6 somewhere. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. Plus, they also have Sergei Bobrovsky backing up Vitek Vanacek right now.
As well. As that being said as well. So you look at that and you say, okay, you would say to the naked eye that Florida probably has the better forward core. Yes. Including Brad Marchand, who is playing is nothing more to me than a rental for them. I don't think he will be back with Florida next year. That's just me. But now we go to the D. Florida, you look at their defensemen, and the only guy that's really being held out of there is Aaron Ekblad. So, but you look at their D, and you brought Seth Jones in. I'm still not 100% sold on that trade. I don't really know why they did it. I don't know if that really moved the dial that much more for them. You have Nate Smith, Dmitry Kulikov, Nico Mikkola, all guys who won that cup last year. But then look over at Tampa. Victor Hedman, Ryan McDonough, Eric Cernak, guys who have gotten the job done 2 years in a row for them. 2 years in a row. On top of which, I think Tampa noticed last year in that Florida series, there was a big hole in their decor, and they did everything they could to bring back Ryan McDonough in order to solve that problem. Now, let's go in net. You're talking about Sergei Bobrovsky. Yes, good goalie. He has a cup, has a Vezina. We also have Andrei Vasilevsky, who also has a cup and has a Vezina and has a Conn Smythe. So if we're going to the naked eye, D and goaltending here, you have to give it to Tampa. No doubt about it. Now, forward-wise, Tampa I would always get on in the past. When they had Steven Stamkos, they would jam Steven Stamkos, Nikita Kucherov, and Braden Point on the same line. They were sort of doing that this year too, but now they've changed it since they brought Yanni Gord back. So line 1 is Yanni Gord, Braden Point, Nikita Kucherov. Line 2, Brandon Hagel, who's been a great surprise for them. Anthony Cirelli, one of the best defensive centers in the league. And Jay Gensel, who has just been nothing short of great for them this year. And it's making that decision to let Stamkos go look much and much better. Third and fourth lines, your typical third and fourth lines. Cam Atkinson on the fourth line gives you a lot of things to work with on the fourth line. And now go back to Florida. And now insert all those injured guys into that lineup there. They brought in Brad Marchand, and he's been there. And Matthew Tkachuk, as we all know, has not played since February. Now we'll go back to a year ago with another team who sort of did the same thing in the Vegas Golden Knights. They tried to piece all of that together just for round 1, assuming they'd get out of it. And it didn't happen. On top of which, they thought that they would just get through Dallas and go on a run, and Dallas said, not so fast. Dallas also had lost to them the previous year and improved their team in order to say, okay, what can we do better to beat Vegas? Tampa, I'm sure, has that loss last year fresh in their minds, and that's why they brought Ryan McDonough back. So yet again, I think the Atlantic bracket's going to be fun. It's going to be good. It's going to be knockdown, drag-out hockey. The difference this year is Tampa has the home ice advantage as well. So, all of that being said, I really do think that not playing all of these forwards together with Florida, in addition to the mileage on them, going to the finals 2 years ago and going all the way last year and not really having an easy series outside of the Tampa series, on top of Tampa not getting out of the first round the past 2 years and maybe being a little more well-rested, leads me to say that Florida is finally going to run out of gas here. It's going to go 7, but it's going to go to the team on the northwest coast of Florida on the Bay. The Tampa Bay Lightning are taking the series in 7 games.
So I have a little bit more of a bold take on this one. I'll preface this. I'll keep this one quick because there's not a lot to dissect with this when I make my points. I think momentum going into the playoffs is everything. It was the same thing with Florida last year and why they had such a great run. They had momentum going into that year. And I still firmly believe that momentum is everything. And that's going to be kind of a narrative that we talk about a little bit later as well. But Tampa Bay, you want to talk about a team that has momentum going into the playoffs. The Tampa Bay Lightning might have among the most amount of momentum going into the playoffs. And it's all because this team can score at will. You have 4 guys with 30 or more goals, and then you have another guy that just missed 30 goals. So you basically have 5 30-plus goal scorers. Nikita Kucherov scored 37 this year, also had 121 points, won the Ross Trophy this year. Brandon Hagel, 90-point year for him in a full NHL season as well of 82 games, 35 goals. Braden Point, 42 goals this year. Jake Gensel, 41 goals. And the person I mentioned before that just missed was Anthony Cirelli, and he scored 27 goals this year. This team is very complete, scary complete. The additions that they made in the offseason have really paid off. Bringing back Ryan McDonough being a huge addition for them. Led the NHL in plus minus this year with a plus 43 rating this year at 35 years old. This team is carrying a ton of momentum going into the playoffs. I also think John Cooper should definitely get a consideration for the Jack Adams. Probably isn't going to be the guy that wins it, but I think he needs to be considered. I'm actually going to say Tampa Bay in 6 games. I think it's not going to go 7. That being said, Florida has a lot of things going for them. Florida, I think, having probably one of the scariest second lines that you could sport in Makachuk, Sam Bennett, and Brad Marchand. That's at least what I'm projecting that they're going to roll out as their second
here's
line.
The thing, too. You say it projection-wise, they haven't played a minute together yet.
Everybody was
saying the same thing with Vegas last year. Oh, Hurdle's in there. They're going to run to the cup. I go, these guys have not played together at all.
Admittedly, though, devil's advocate, I wasn't one of the ones thinking of like, oh, they have Hurdle. All right, Stanley Cup. This is a little bit different in the sense that these, especially flanking Sam Bennett, Makachuk, and Brad Marchand, these are guys that have always been pests in the playoffs specifically. And like proven guys that are gamers in big situations that even though they haven't played a minute yet together, I'm going to be very intrigued by what they do. And that's going to be a storyline absolutely for Florida to follow of, all right, it's finally time for this line to play together. A lot of people have been hyping this up. Are they going to put up or are they going to shut up? Are they going to clam up? It's also just going to be an interesting storyline to follow to see what Brad Marchand ends up doing next, especially if it's a first round exit. That's just going to be interesting to see. But Tampa Bay's carrying the momentum in there. I think this is going to be a fun, physical series. But I'm still going to say Tampa Bay in 6 and not 7. I wanted to go 7, but I think Tampa Bay is going to finish them off in 6. That firepower is going to be a little bit too much for Florida, I think. That being said, if Florida makes it past, you can definitely thank Paul Maurice, their head coach, for that one, for sure, for trying to coach around Tampa Bay. Moving on to the next series, the Washington Capitals versus the Montreal Canadiens. This is a fun little surprising one because, again, Montreal, a team that's carrying a ton of momentum going into this playoff, having a fantastic March for them, but they're running up against one of the best teams in the NHL, surprisingly, the Washington Capitals. Tom, what are some X factors? Who comes out on top?
Well, the X factors here are Montreal needs all 4 of their lines to show up. Washington's a top-heavy team. Montreal has all the momentum, but they don't have any experience. You look up and down this roster here, Patrick Laine played some playoff games. Brendan Gallagher's played some playoff games. That's about it. Look up and down.
Jake Evans also. Jake Evans was a part of that run.
You know, David Savard was on one of those Tampa teams, you know.
Yep.
So they haven't, they're not quite ripe with the playoffs yet. They're not. At the same time, Washington's been a surprise this year. To say, I'll be serious about it. But I look up and down their roster too, their forwards, and they have a lot of guys marked out right now. I've been saying it all year. Washington is punching well above their weight right now. They are. I don't consider them a Stanley Cup contender. I don't consider them a top 5 team despite winning the East. I just don't consider them that good of a team, even though their record shows differently. And their run of play since Ovechkin broke that record, even before so, has not been good. They have not been good. They just were a team that happened to take advantage of issues in Carolina, issues in New York, and injury issues in New Jersey, and ran with it. Hence why they finished where they finished. Now, you say you have Alex Ovechkin there. Outside of 2018, Alex Ovechkin has never been that big of a performer when it comes to the playoffs. You have a lot of other younger guys like Ryan Leonard's in there from BC, Connor McMichael. There'll be some other guys. Alexi Protas has had a great year for them. Logan Thompson in net, who's been there. I mean, I look at this, and it's a 1 versus 8. But 1 versus 8. But this might be the most evenly matched 1 versus 8 I've ever seen. Yeah. On paper, forward-wise, they look fairly even. Back on D, I'll give it to Washington. You have Jacob Chikrin, and you have John Carlson back there. That's better than anything Montreal has right now. In net, you have Sam Montembeault versus Logan Thompson. Fairly even, I'd say. None of them are a Vezina Trophy caliber goaltender. So this might be the most even 1 versus 8 series in the history of this sport. With that being said, I'm going to sound like a broken record here. I think that this is going to go 7 again. It's going to be even. Montreal may look like they're in the driver's seat sometimes. But I think at the end of the day, Washington does squeeze this one out. But then I think that's it for them this year. So I'll give this to Washington in 7. But just, it's a young upcoming Montreal team. It's a Washington team that's better than what they really are on paper. And it's Alex Ovechkin in the playoffs, who outside of the Cup victory in 2018 has never been that good.
Yeah, I'll keep this one quick and brief just because I'll come out right and say it. I think Washington's coming out on top in this series. And it pains me to say because I really like what Montreal has really done with this rebuild. I think that this Montreal team in about a year or two's time is really going to get ready to really make a true big run. They do need some work on defense, and they're developing for sure. Lane Hudson was a revelation this year on defense. Caden Gooley took another step this year as well. I think they're really hoping for guys like that to really make that next step. And the next logical next step to them is get some playoff experience. For Cole Caulfield, Nick Suzuki, Uri Slavkovsky, Ivan Demidov, who made his NHL debut just a week ago at this point. Also the first Montreal player since Doug Gilmour to wear number 93. So in pretty good company there.
I mean, Gilmour was only in Montreal for about 3 minutes.
Yeah, he was in there for a sneeze, but still, he was there for a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
But then again, Dougie Gilmour was also with a few teams for a cup of coffee, New Jersey included.
Chicago as well. Scored the last goal ever in Maple Leaf Gardens as a member of the Blackhawks.
That is true.
Pretty tight.
But I think Montreal has a lot to be excited for. From watching them live last year in Montreal at Centre Bell, I really like this team overall. I just don't think they're quite ready to really show up and show out yet. I think next year is going to be that year, depending on the moves that they make in the offseason. But with Washington, their team, that's a bit of a Cinderella at the moment as well.
I think they could both fall back down to earth next year, both of these teams.
Yeah, and I think Washington has certainly been rallying around Alex Ovechkin, and admittedly, at 39 years old, Alex Ovechkin is probably having one of the best 39-year-old seasons I have ever seen with 44 goals this year. Uh, but yeah, Washington is boxing a little bit above their weight right now, but the mentality amongst this lineup has been the big difference for them. Pierre-Luc Dubois looks like he's finally found his spot in the NHL and has played very, very well with Washington. Tom Wilson has played a much more straight and narrow game and a more power forward style game than a grinding style of game. And I think that's made a big difference for him in his game. This was his best season by far. I actually want to pull his stats up real quick on Hockey Reference. He had 33 goals and 32 assists this year. He, first of all, more goals than he's ever scored, more assists than he's ever had, and the most amount of points he's ever had as well. 65 points this year in 81 games. But the big difference there for him was less penalty minutes overall. Only 100 penalty minutes this year. And far more defensively responsible hockey this year overall as well. And I think that's made a huge difference. And not a lot of people are talking about that with Washington. He's definitely an X factor because I think he now realizes with this game how he can properly get under team skins without it being at the detriment of the Washington Capitals. I had to find the words there. But again, overall, I think this is going to be a fun series. I think Washington comes out on top. I think it's going to be a little bit shorter, and I'm going to say 5 games. I'm going to say Montreal definitely gets a win at home, but unfortunately, that's about it. That being said, I look forward to talking to more about Montreal going into this upcoming season because I think they're really ready to make that next big leap in the Atlantic next year for sure. Moving
I'm
on to
more
the
on the
final
Ottawa
matchup.
train with that one, but that's just me.
I agree, but I think we're going to start seeing like some Canadian teams really dominate the Atlantic going forward next year. But conversation for later. This one's going to be tough for Tom to talk about because this probably stings a little bit to talk about. But the last matchup in the East, the Carolina Hurricanes and the New Jersey Devils. So X factors and who wins this series?
Well, okay. I'm looking at the lines now. So
Keep
if
in
I
mind
look
with New
at
Jersey that I think Daily Faceoff has their lines all for toots as well.
no,
Actually,
they do. I went on NHL.com to take a look. So I'm looking
yeah.
at the lines here
What are these lines? Yikes!
because I
Yeah,
needed to see Carolina too because Carolina held half their freaking team out last game. So
yeah, exactly. So Daily Faceoff, like if word to the wise, we are recording this right now on April 18th. It's Friday in the afternoon right now, and I wait till Saturday to look at the lines. Wait till Sunday to look at the lines as well to really see what each team is rolling out.
So I'm looking at the lines here. Forward wise, I actually like the Devils' first and third lines a little bit better than Carolina's. But the second and fourth lines, I like Carolina's a lot better than the Devils. I look at the defensive personnel. I look up and down at Carolina. I look up and down at the Devils. I give Carolina the edge on that one by a long shot. I look at the goaltending. I do give it to the Devils, but it depends on who shows up. What Jacob Markstrom shows up. The one who played against the Rangers on that Saturday afternoon or the one who played against the Red Wings on Wednesday night. I'm not even sure if he got the nod that game. The Devils have been a streaky team all year. There's times that you've watched them, and you're a Devils fan, and I don't watch them quite as often as you do. There's times they've looked like a legit Stanley Cup contender like the team from 2 years ago. And then there's other times they've looked like a team that can't even get out of their own way. Carolina, for the most part this year, outside of the Mikko Rantanen BS, has been a fairly consistent team because they're just a fairly consistent team, and they've been a fairly consistent team. They have the home ice. They have a fairly deep depth on forward and D. The goaltending is going to be bipolar again. It was bipolar against the Rangers last year. But I'll say one thing about their goaltending, it generally always gets them at least a first round series win. And as much as you don't want to hear me say this, I have to say it. Dougie Hamilton for the Devils is going to be playing hurt. He's projected to play on the third pair. He's going to QB your power play. But I think a lot of Devil fans are losing their patience with Dougie Hamilton. And Dougie Hamilton, for as much as everybody likes to toot his own horn, Dougie Hamilton played himself out of Boston. Dougie Hamilton played himself out of Carolina. And now Dougie Hamilton might be playing himself right out of New Jersey as well. I look at what they have back there. Brent Burns and Dmitry Orlov can run either power play. I like Shane Gostisbehere back there. Jalen Chatfield is a solid guy. And Jacob Slavin, the way he played at Four Nations his defensive play at Four Nations was great. So all that being said, if we go by law of averages with the way Carolina's goaltending has played in the first round the past 3 years, whether it was the Bruins where it went 7 or the Islanders where they had an easier time, oh, you're not going to like this. Without Jack Hughes, with an injured Dougie Hamilton, I'm going with the Carolina Hurricanes in 5 games here.
I think that's entirely possible. That being said, New Jersey is a very resilient team. This is a very different team than the past 2 years, especially compared to last year, because like when Jack Hughes got injured last year and the Devils went on their big slump, that team was not structured to win without him. This team, the way it's been built in the offseason and throughout this season, this team can survive without Jack Hughes. Now, that being said, can they survive in the playoffs? That's a different story. But I think that's also why Dougie Hamilton really kind of rushed to get himself back to be ready for the playoffs, because the Devils know that the power play lives and dies by Dougie Hamilton in a lot of ways. Yeah, Jack Hughes is a major contributor on the power play, but not a lot of people give enough credit to just how important Dougie Hamilton is to this New Jersey power play. Luke Hughes has certainly developed very well on the back end and will certainly probably quarterback one of the power play units next year for the Devils. But he's not the same level that Dougie Hamilton is right now in terms of his offensive ability on the power play. And I think that's going to be a huge X factor for the Devils. That being said, Carolina's got a decent team and New Jersey has a decent team. Comparing the offenses, I would probably give the slight edge offensively to New Jersey very slightly at the moment, just because Nico Heischer's had a great year. Timo Meier has had a fantastic March going into April, and I think he's going to carry that momentum going into the playoffs as well. Stefan Nason, who was a great acquisition by the Devils as well in the offseason, is very familiar with how this Carolina team plays in the playoffs. So I think that's also going to be a factor as well in the playoffs. Plus, you have guys on the Devils that just seem to show up in the playoffs. Andre Palat, Eric Howla. Those are 2 guys that I think Devils fans are going to need to really watch because, again, regular season, we all complain of just like, why did we sign these guys? And then in the playoffs, we're just like, our saviors are here every single time. But the Devils also sport a better defense this year as well. Yes, Dougie's going to be playing hurt, but you also now at this point have Brett Pesce. You have Brendan Dillon, guys that you didn't have last year and in the playoffs the year before that, guys who are far more defensively responsible and are very familiar with the playoffs and understand what it takes to survive in the playoffs. And then in net, I give the edge to New Jersey, but like Tom had mentioned before, which Jacob Markstrom are we going to get? Which Jake Allen are we going to get? You could play either of those 2 guys. You could flip a coin of who you want to play. Personally, if you ask me, I think Jacob Markstrom gets the nod. I think he's been fantastic this year. Jake Allen's also been fantastic this year as well, but I think Markstrom deserves the nod going into the playoffs. This is a reason why you got him. No knock to Carolina with Pierre Kachekov. He's a very good goalie as well, but I think Markstrom and Allen are a better duo. Who's going to win this particular series? I'm going to be bold. I'm going to be a homer, and it's going to go 7 games because New Jersey is very familiar with games that go to 7, especially against teams in the Metropolitan Division, if you know what I mean there, Tom.
Yeah,
But
different team. This is a different story.
different team, you're right. But the difference here is they're not playing Carolina completely banged up. They're going up against a Carolina team with Timo Meyer actually healthy, which is also, I think, a big X factor here too. I'm going to say New Jersey in 7. I don't know. Carolina's team has been on the downswing for me, and New Jersey's only going up. That being said, I don't see them making it past the second round. I want to see them go as far as they can, but without Jack Hughes, it's going to be really, really difficult. I'm just happy that New Jersey even made the playoffs, honestly. Moving on to the West Coast, we'll start flying through these because these are going to be a little bit easier to peg with these. Winnipeg Jets versus the St. Louis Blues. Winnipeg Jets were the President's Trophy winner this year, but the St. Louis Blues are going in probably with the most momentum going into the playoffs, winning 14 in a row at one point this year under the tutelage of Jim Montgomery, who wonder if Boston's really regretting that move now. But anyway, Tom, X Factors, who wins this series?
Well, your number one X factor of all here, it's obvious. It's your goaltending. Mm-hmm. And this is a 7-game rematch of that Four Nations final. Connor Hellebuck versus Jordan Binnington. Binnington shows up in big moments. It's been proven. Hellebuck does not. We look at some other things here. I look at Winnipeg's defense as opposed to St. Louis's D. Slight nod to Winnipeg because they have Josh Morrissey and Neil Punk, and they're great offensive defensemen. But I feel depth-wise and just all around, St. Louis might have a little bit of a better defensive core there. Now, you look at the forwards for Winnipeg. Their first line is obviously better than St. Louis's. You have Kyle Connor and Mark Scheifele up there, who have both had great years. Great years for both of them. Start getting past that. Jordan Kyrie's on St. Louis's second line. Better than anybody Winnipeg has on theirs. Third line, I like, you have Oscar Sundqvist, Matthew Joseph, and Zach Baldock. I kind of like St. Louis's third line better, and I kind of like Winnipeg's fourth line better. You talk about your favorite team, the New Jersey Devils. And this Winnipeg team reminds me of those New Jersey Devils teams from the late 90s, specifically 98 and 99. They would run through it in the regular season, finish first in the East, first in the division. You'd figure they would have an easy first round, and the first round was never easy. They wound up going home. And I do think that this is an upset special here. I haven't bought, just like I don't buy what Washington's selling, I don't buy what Winnipeg is selling either. I'm not buying what they're trying to sell me this year with Winnipeg. They had a good season. They won the President's Trophy. That's all grand. I know what winning the President's Trophy is about and not going far. Although I will say this, every year the Rangers won the President's Trophy, they always got out of the first round. It's what happened after that was always a question mark. Kyle Connor, Mark Scheifele, great years. But I don't know if those great years are going to be able to transfer over into playoff success. So I do think that the St. Louis Blues take this series in 6 games. I'm going to be bold here. I think the momentum St. Louis has and what they've been doing is reminiscent of 2019. I don't know if the exact same thing is going to happen again, but I do think it will happen in this series. They take this series in 6 games. The Blues move on to the next round.
I think that's a perfectly fine take, and I think that's certainly popular for a lot of people. I think St. Louis is going into this playoffs as a potentially scary team overall. If you ask me, though, Connor Hellebuck might be somebody that wins the Hart Trophy at the end of this year, but will solidify it. The vote for me for him for the Hart is him showing up in the playoffs, and I think he finally really wants to kill the narrative that he can't perform in the playoffs. He has a much better team in front of him than he has in previous years. This might be one of the more complete Winnipeg teams we've seen in a while. And it might not look like that on paper, but in execution, absolutely. Winnipeg, in terms of goal differential this year, they were a plus 86 this year. And a lot of people are quick to point out, oh, well, that's because of Connor Hellebuck and the goals against. And sure, that is a contributing factor. Only 191 goals against this year against the Winnipeg Jets. But they also scored 277 goals this year as well. That puts them in the upper half of the NHL and definitely in the upper echelon of teams that made the playoffs this year. Actually, I'm pretty sure that puts them top 5. Just eyeballing it. Actually, it's kind of ironic. Winnipeg, Dallas, and Colorado in the Central are all tied for goals for at 277 this year. Just fun little observation there. Scored more than the Edmonton Oilers this year, which is also surprising to me. Winnipeg can score, and Winnipeg is a very good team and should not be overlooked when facing the St. Louis Blues whatsoever. I like St. Louis right now. They've been a fun team to watch overall. It's been fun to see them really go back on the upswing. I think their top line of Jake Neighbors, Robert Thomas, and Pavel Buchnevich has been a lot of fun to watch as well. Jordan Kyrou is a pleasure to watch as well. He's so fast. But I think Winnipeg has the edge here, and I'm going to go with the popular pick here, and I'm going to say Winnipeg in 6. That's just my bold prediction. I don't think it goes 7. I think Winnipeg still gets a little scared from a couple of the wins that St. Louis gets. But I'm going to say Winnipeg in 6. All right, Dallas Stars versus the Colorado Avalanche. This is another big series to watch that could potentially go either which way. Tom, I think we know who really the X factors are in this matchup, but what do you expect to see and who comes out on top?
So it always has seemed throughout history that Dallas always beats Colorado no matter what. And if you look up and down at the forward core, you go line by line and depth by depth, you would say Dallas has the better depth, and that is very, very true. Dallas is always good at spreading their talent amongst all 4 of their lines. It's something they've always been very good at. Now, you look at the D, and it's about even except for one thing. Colorado has Cale Makar. Dallas doesn't. Now, look at the goaltending. Colorado has the Blackwood and Wedgwood rotation versus Jake Ottinger, so you would figure Dallas has the advantage in net. The thing that Colorado has up top that Dallas doesn't is they have Nathan McKinnon. Dallas doesn't. In addition to this, Dallas has a lot of good players. But are any of these players game breakers like McKinnon and Makar are? And McKinnon and Makar have that extra boost now after going to 4 nations and being, outside of Connor McDavid, being the 2 best players on Team Canada. On top of which, if we want to talk about mental boosts, Gabriel Landeskog is projected to play in this series. We just don't know when.
Yeah.
Dallas' problem has always been, their depth has always been great. They've always been a good team. They've always been built to go deep. But the issue with Dallas has always been they always run into that team with a game breaker. Last year, it was Edmonton. They looked like they had Edmonton on the ropes. McDavid and Edmonton woke up. 2 years ago, it was Vegas. Vegas had Eichel. Jack Eichel woke up against them and took them apart. And I bring up your New Jersey Devils again from those late 90s teams because I'm sure you remember that Pittsburgh series where they shouldn't have lost, but Jaromir Jagr put the Pittsburgh on his back and won the last 2 games by himself.
Yeah.
On top of which, Mikko Rantanen is playing his former team. The real issue is this. A lot of people were very, very high on Rantanen. He went to Carolina. He didn't do much. He's been a little bit better in Dallas. 5 goals, 13 assists, 18 points in 20 games. That's been okay. Hasn't been great. Hasn't been world-beating. And they brought him in to improve the team. But is he really that game breaker that Colorado has and they don't? The fact is, this is a real toss-up here. But I do think that maybe, just maybe, for the first time ever, the Colorado Avalanche are going to beat the Dallas Stars. I just think that as structured of a team as Dallas is, it just always seems to fall apart when you have other teams that can double and triple shift their best players to break that structure. I don't think
No, go on. Sorry.
I don't think this is going to be an easy series. I don't think this is going to be a short series. I think it's going 6 or 7. But I gotta give the nod to Colorado here. And I think Colorado, that loss to Dallas last year, is fresh in their minds. And they did everything they could to improve their depth. Might not be as good as Dallas's depth, but you don't need that good of a depth when you have Nathan McKinnon and Cale Makar on your team.
I got to be honest. I think it's unfortunate that we're getting this matchup in the first round. This should be, in my mind, a Western Conference final match.
That's actually something I want to address later on too, but we can wait.
Yeah. This is probably the one matchup that I'm really looking forward to the most. This is going to be a fun series to watch. And flip a coin, it could really go either which way. Or could it? Because Colorado, I think, really has a bigger edge than a lot of people realize. Mostly case in point to what Tom said before. And I'm not going to beat a dead horse with this one. Dallas does not have the same level of firepower or game breakers like Colorado has in Nathan McKinnon and Cale Makar. They just don't. That being said, I think Dallas is probably one of the more complete teams that Colorado would be facing. But I'll be really curious to see if and when Gabriel Landeskog does play. He is officially on the roster now for Colorado. So when and if he plays in this series, I think it's going to be something to monitor and keep a close eye on. But there's something that Colorado has this year that they really haven't had in previous years, and that's consistency in net. Mackenzie Blackwood and Scott Wedgwood have been very good for them since they've acquired both of them. And they needed a boost after starting the year with Alexander Georgiev and Justice Anunin, who just did not live up to the expectations that Colorado was hoping for. So they did a full scene change behind in between the pipes, and I think it's really worked out for Colorado. But that's also why I think I have them getting the edge over this series. And it's no knock to Dallas whatsoever. Jake Ottinger is one of the best goaltenders in the entire NHL. And I do want to see him eventually hoist a Stanley Cup, and Dallas overall to eventually hoist a Stanley Cup. And I think Dallas will in the next few years potentially. But I think Colorado has the mental game going their way. I think they're really going to try to rally around Gabriel Landeskog and get him one more Stanley Cup before he officially hangs him up, because I think that's really the only reason why Landeskog's even playing at this point, is like the tantalizing dream of winning another Stanley Cup. But we're going to see. I'm going to say Colorado in... It's going to go to distance. I'm going to say Colorado in 7. That's my prediction. Vegas Golden Knights versus the Minnesota Wild. I hate to admit this one. This series I'm not as jazzed up about, which is disappointing because it's Marc-Andre Fleury in his last ever playoff matchup, probably not really going to play that much at all, facing his former team, the Vegas Golden Knights. So I should be more excited for this one. I just feel like I'm not, especially because this series is probably the most predictable. So, Tom, let's keep this one quick. Vegas versus Minnesota, X factors. Why does Vegas win this series?
Well, we'll actually go backwards. We'll start with something you were talking about just now, goaltending. That's the only advantage Minnesota has over Vegas in this series at all.
Completely.
Forward-wise, Vegas. You have Jack Eichel and Thomas Hertl as your top 2 centers. Obviously better than Joel Eriksson-Ek and Freddie Gaudreau. You have Kirill Kaprizov, Kirill the Thrill. Would have had 112 points if he was healthy all year. But that's about it. That's about it for Minnesota. I looked them up and down stat-wise. I mean, your leading scorer was Matt Boldy with 73 points in 82 games. I mean, and that area of separation would have been huge if Kirill played the whole year. Marco Rossi, great year by him, 60 points. But look at 60 points. Your leading scorers have 73 and 60 points.
Yeah.
Vegas, you could kind of say the same thing. Eichel had 94 and 77. Now, you look at Mark Stone, he has 67 points, but that's in 66 games. That would have been 82 points if he played the whole year.
Yeah.
Thomas Hurdle, 61 and 73. Let's put that around 70 if he, maybe a little less than that if he played the whole year. Shea Theodore, 57 points, your top scoring defenseman versus their top scoring defenseman, Jared Spurgeon, 32 points. Unless Marc-Andre Fleury and Minnesota's goaltending puts on a clinic in this series, and he's not even going to start. It's going to be Philip Gustafson probably. Unless they put on a goaltending clinic, this is going to be over in 5 games. This might even be a sweep for Vegas. This is going to be a short one. Vegas has them beaten in every possible situation. Even if Kaprizov tries to pull a Jaromir Jagr, I just don't think it's enough. I just think Vegas is a little more well-rested this year. They have the loss to Dallas fresh in their minds. This is Vegas' series, 4 or 5 games tops. Maybe they'll give Minnesota a game.
Yeah, I'll give Minnesota a game for sure. And let me also just say congrats to Marc-Andre Fleury on a wonderful career. 575 wins, earns him second place all time in wins in the NHL. He's a bona fide Hall of Famer and deserves a lot of respect on his name. And a big reason why Pittsburgh was so good for so long, winning multiple Stanley Cups along the way. But he's not the one putting Minnesota on his back right now, unless something happens to Philip Gustafson. Vegas is the more complete team. That, and I wouldn't call it a mental boost, but there's something about Riley Smith back on Vegas that has me thinking, I don't know, Vegas can surprise some people.
I liked him. I liked him on the Rangers, but I understand why they had to do it.
Yeah, it had to be done. He just wasn't quite working out with the Rangers, unfortunately. But Vegas, I think, has the clear edge here, and I don't see them losing this series. I'm going to say Vegas in 5 as well. It could even be a sweep, honestly. I think if Kirill Kaprizov was healthy for the entire year, I don't think they would have had to face Vegas, honestly. I think Minnesota would have ended up being a better team this year. But it's how the cookie crumbles sometimes. Final matchup we're previewing, the Los Angeles Kings versus the Edmonton Oilers. Now, normally we'd be saying that the Edmonton Oilers is the clear winner here in this series, but I don't know if I'm so sure about this one. So, Tom, X Factors, and who do you think wins this series?
Well, the Oilers are banged up. There's no doubt about that. They're banged up. We start with goaltending again. LA has the nod there. Darcy Kemper over Picard and Skinner for Edmonton. You look at the D, I'd reckon to say Drew Doughty's probably the best defenseman out of this group of 12. Vladislav Gavrikov is a great defensive defenseman on their second pair. I think he's better than anybody than Jake Woolman or Troy Setcher on Edmonton's second pair. I would love to see Gavrikov on the Rangers next year if they can get him free agency besides the point. Brant Clark on LA's third pair is better than anybody Edmonton has. We go to the forward core. Even as banged up as Edmonton is, I still have to give it to Edmonton. You know, LA has been great this year. They have been. Let's not beat around the bush. They were a lot better than anybody thought they were going to be. At the same time, what Edmonton has up there, injured or not, even injured, I reckon to say is still probably better than what LA has. I still think so. And keep in mind, you have Connor McDavid 100 points in 67 games. He would have been well above that had he played all 82. I'm just trying to pull up LA's stats real quick here, which I'm about to do.
Yeah.
The main difference this year, as opposed to other years, is that LA has home ice advantage. Generally, it's always the other way around. So if we're going by D, LA's got better D. If we're going by goaltending, LA has better goaltending. But what do we just talk about with Dallas and Colorado? X factors, guys who could put their team on the back and carry their team. McDavid showed he could do it last year in the run to the finals with Edmonton. McDavid showed this year that on a team full of guys who had won, Crosby had 2 cups, McKinnon had a cup, and people were saying that, oh, maybe McDavid will be a third wheel because he's never been that far and he's never played in a big game besides last year. McDavid, far and away on that 4 Nations winning Team Canada, was the best player on that team. I went to the game against Finland at the Boston Garden, and with all that talent on the ice that Team Canada had, he still stood out amongst everybody. by far the best player out there. Even with him and Draisaitl banged up, they both finished with 106 for Draisaitl and 100 for Edmonton points-wise. LA's top scorer, Adrian Kempe, with 73 points. Kopitar had 67, is a little on the older side with 81 games. And Kopitar has been there. He's played big games. Don't get me wrong. Evan Bouchard, 67 points as a defenseman. We'll give him that. After that, it was a steep drop-off to 49 points, but not too much different than what LA had. Obviously, I mentioned goaltending, I mentioned home ice advantage. But this is Edmonton. They've proved that they can play in the playoffs. They've proved that they can win rounds. I think that this, as much as everybody wants to ride LA's coattails this year, I just don't think LA has that top-heavy talent to match what Edmonton has. And I think it's going to be a 6-game victory for Edmonton. And what happens after that with them is anybody's guess.
Yeah, it's a tougher one to peg for me just because Edmonton is so banged up right now that I don't know what they're putting on the ice for game one.
I'm looking at their projected lineup here. They're putting it out as all the usual suspects are going to play outside of maybe Evander Kane and John Klingberg, and Trent Frederick's not playing either. But
yeah,
still, I look at the lineup; it's still a pretty solid lineup.
It's still a solid lineup, but like if they're playing banged up, that's going to be really, really interesting to see how LA tries to maybe take advantage of that a little bit. And they have a capable lineup between, guys like Anze Kopitar, Quentin Byfield, Alex Turcotte, Kevin Fiala, Warren Fogle, Andre Kuzmenko, Alex Laferriere, just to name a few guys. And that defense is a lot better than a lot of people realize. Between Anderson, Doughty, Clark, Gavrikov, I think are all guys that are really going to give the Edmonton Oilers a lot of trouble overall. That, and there's the goaltending for LA. Their goaltending is far superior to Edmonton's. Darcy Kemper has had a fantastic year for the LA Kings. And add in the fact that behind him is David Riddick, and he's been no slouch in net as well. LA is a potentially scary team for Edmonton to play in the first round. In some scenarios, I could see LA even upsetting them for sure. But if we're going realistically, I think Edmonton is more than motivated to get back to the Stanley Cup this year. I'm going to say Edmonton in 6. It's going to be a close matchup, I think. I think because Edmonton's banged up, that's going to be a factor to monitor, and certainly going to be a reason why Edmonton wouldn't make it past the first round if that were the case. But yeah, I'm going to finish things up here with our question of the day to really wrap this all in a big bow, because this is a pretty big episode to begin with for our first round predictions. But Tom, I'm going to put you on the spot here. Who's the team to beat in the playoffs this year?
That's really tough. I really don't know. It's tough. I do think the Stanley Cup, I can't even say what's coming out of this year. If you were to tell me right now, I could pick one in each conference, or 3. I could pick 3 right now. In the East, Tampa. In the West, Colorado and Vegas. I do think if Edmonton sees Vegas or Colorado down the line with their injury status, they might run into a lot of trouble. I do think a well-rested Tampa will have no problem handling anybody who they play in the East. So it's those 3 teams. But these first-round matchups are all going to be pretty tough, especially with some of them like Colorado and Dallas, Tampa and Florida, Toronto and Ottawa. And maybe, just maybe, it's time for the league to think about going back to a 1 versus 8.
Yeah, you're not wrong. In the East, I'm going to agree with you here. Tampa Bay, I think, is very much a team to beat. I wouldn't be surprised to see if Florida can find a way to make it past them, and that would be taking down a giant if they do so, which is hilarious when thinking that Florida is the reigning defending Stanley Cup champion in this matchup. and being overlooked in that regard. But on the Western side of things, I still think Winnipeg is absolutely a team to beat. And then for me, for my money, Colorado is the other team to really watch in the West. Could this be the year that the Stanley Cup returns home to Canada? We're going to see. But who knows at this point? First round's going to be a lot of fun. I'm excited for it. And yeah, thank you all for joining us here today. If you like the content that we brought to you, let us know down below. Subscribe, youtube.com/NHL on I80 Sports. And comment down below with what you think of these matchups. Give us your predictions down below as well to join the conversation. And drop a like if you like our content as well, and hit the bell notification under subscription so that way you know when all of our content goes live. Enough of us ranting, more of us watching the playoffs that start this weekend. But until then, I'm Brian. He's Tom. This has been our first round preview of the 2025 Stanley Cup playoffs here on I80 Sports.